Ooh, we're back from quarantine, baby. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Making a Song from Scratch. Before we get started, first order of business, how you guys like the new hairstyle? I can't really tell if I look like James Dean or a first grader whose mom made him comb his hair for picture day. So let me know in the comments down below. Today, we are going to start mixing the beat, by far the most intimidating part for new people. And I'm going to do my best to explain what's going on and try to make everything make sense. I do use a couple of different producers and their mixing style, and I'll link those videos for the source material down below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so we're back in our session from last time, and let's go ahead and start to mix the beat. I always mix my beat before my vocals. I don't know, that's just the way I do it. So let's jump into it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is actually group all my vocals and turn them off so we don't have to listen to that. The very first thing I do in my mixing process is I order my tracks in the order that I'm actually going to mix them. So I usually do drums, hi-hats, 808s, and then any of the melody stuff. So the first thing we do is called gain staging, which basically is making the volumes of each of the tracks play well together so that they all sound at, the right volume. So in order to do that, I set everything back to 0. And if we were to play this right now, it probably sounds really bad. So that sounds all messed up. It's all super loud and it just doesn't work. So how I start is with the drums. So I'm just going to solo just the drums. And the first plugin I use is Span by Voxnego, which is just a gain plugin. That's all it is. It just shows you the level of the gain or kind of the loudness of the track. So I grab that and then I go, and this is a free plugin, so it's awesome. And I grab a gain plugin so I can change the gain. So my drums I set at about -12. So let's go ahead and listen to it and turn down the gain to get it to be 12. Okay, that's about good right there. The next thing I do with my drums is usually use a compressor. Let's just try full parallel, just a little preset here. And every time you add a plugin, you want to readjust to make sure you're still at a level. Okay, cool. So let's move on to the hi-hats now. Really, I don't do much with my hi-hats. I just set the level so that they are comparable to the actual drums. Okay, that's about good right there. So now we move on to the 808s. For my 808s, I set the gain level at about -18, sometimes 15, depending on the track. This one is kind of not a super trap heavy type beat, so we're gonna go with about 18, maybe 17. So I just grab the same plugin I used earlier, and let's look at the levels of the 808s. See, right off the bat, that's way too loud. So let's turn this way down. Okay, cool. So I don't always do this, but we might try it on this. Take some sort of distortion and put it on the 808. So let's go ahead and find some sort of distortion. Okay, so with this distortion on, without it on, it sounds like this. And with the distortion, it's just a little grittier. But we do want to turn down the gain here. Okay, cool. So now that all those are done, I usually group the drums and the hi-hats. And what I usually do is first I take a span again and put it on the group, another utility, so I can check my levels of the group itself. Okay, cool. And then I first take another compressor, a different compressor, and put it on the group so that it kind of squishes everything and makes it sound like just one drum kit is playing it. So let's go ahead and, I don't know, let's do a gentle squeeze compressor, see what that sounds like. I think that helps a lot. Okay, that's good. The next thing I usually do is I EQ. And an EQ is it stands for equalizer, and basically it allows you to turn up and turn down the volume of a track at different frequencies, so lower frequencies, higher frequencies, and everything in between. So look at the EQ and find where the kick is hitting, and I just boost that a little bit, and the clap as well, and everything else will kind of move out of the way of the kick and the clap. So if you look at the spectrum here as it's playing, you can see that about right here is where the kick is. So we're just going to take the first one and move it over there, raise it up a little bit. Okay, cool. And now we're going to do the same thing for the clap. So I think the snare goes about right here. So I'm going to take this second one and move it over here and just boost that just a little bit. One thing I always like to do with my drums is cut the really low frequencies and cut the really high frequencies. So we're going to do that now. So let's go over here, bring this here, and make this a shelf and cut it at about 20 hertz, because anything below 20 hertz is pretty hard for the human ear to hear, so we don't really need it. Okay, cool. And the same thing for the highs. And this one is going to go at about 20,000 hertz. So before the EQ, it sounds like this. And after, I think it hits a little bit harder. So the next thing I do is I basically copy the EQ that's on the drums, but opposite for the 808. So what I mean by that is I put a EQ on the 808, cut the highs, cut the lows, and I find the frequency where the kick hits, and I kind of carve it out of the 808 so that they're not competing with each other. So actually what I'm going to do, go here to the drum group and find the frequency that I use. So 52.5 hertz right here. And I'm going to take that frequency and I am going to cut it out of the 808. And we are just going to do a small cut, nothing huge, but just to carve it out just a little bit. And we can actually take this one and move it higher. So that helps to allow the kick to be heard a little bit better. So without, with. And I'm actually going to tighten this up just a little bit. Okay, and that's pretty much all for the drums. Now that that is done, we can move on to the piano and the guitar and all that kind of stuff. So the piano is the main portion of the melody, so we'll start with that. And I usually set these to about -18. We're just going to go ahead and get span, and I know it's going to be loud, so I'm going to turn it down. Wow, that was perfect. Okay, so one thing you may notice is the two bars aren't the same level, and that is because the piano that I'm using in this isn't a mono device, it's a stereo device, so it makes it sound a little bit different for each of the ears. So that's why these two are not the same, and that's pretty normal for a lot of melodic kind of stuff. So one thing I am going to do for the piano is probably put a little bit of reverb on it, just to make it sound a little more interesting. So take a reverb, let's put it in a hall. How about let's do a church? And that's way too much reverb. So we're gonna take the dry wet, turn it all the way down. That's what it sounds like before, and then we're just gonna move it up just a little bit. So it just gives it a little space. I might also EQ this so that I can cut out the low ends and leave that just for the drums and the bass. So let's do that right now. So I just found a preset, a piano preset, and it already kind of cut the lows, which is good. We're just going to cut them a little bit more maybe. That sounds pretty good. So now let's move on to actually the fingerpick guitar. Once again, we're going to start with span, and utility. Turn this down, and let's just solo this. Okay, cool. So one thing I always do with my instruments like this is, especially with a guitar, I always put an EQ on it because acoustic guitars tend to sound a little buzzy. So I try to get that out of there, and then always reverb. It's just kind of a given. So let's EQ it first. Now, one thing that you do a lot, I do a lot, when EQing is basically you find a frequency that sounds really bad. So you boost the frequency high. You find a frequency that sounds particularly bad, and everything is going to sound bad when we boost it like this, but something that sounds really bad, and then we can cut that out. So let's do that now. All right, and we're going to do that one more time. And one thing I like to do with melodic guitars like this, especially when I'm finger picking, is I like to boost the high end just a little bit so I can get those high notes heard a little bit more in the mix. So I'm going to add another, move it over here. And a good rule of thumb is whenever you're EQing, when you boost something, most of the time you want it to boost at a wider peak, and when you cut something, you want sharper peaks. Like that. So we're going to do a little wide peak here and just boost it right here. Okay, cool. Let's see what it sounds like with the guitar. So after listening to it with the guitar, I actually didn't really like those two cuts. It kind of boxes in the guitar, so I took them out, and that's fine. Now let's go ahead and add some reverb to this. Okay, see what that sounds like. Obviously, again, way too much reverb. Turn it all the way down. Move it back up. I think that sounds a lot better. And I forgot to mention, the reason you use reverb is to basically give it space. So when you record in a recording studio or in your room, especially like I do, everything sounds very dry. And so you can use reverb to give it a little more space and make it sound like it's in a different, type of room. So that's why we use it. So let's check the span levels again. We actually got to turn it up a little bit. Sweet. Okay, let's go ahead and see what that sounds like with the drums and the 808 too. I think it sounds pretty good. All right, next thing in the list is the MIDI guitar. So solo that. Way too loud. Once again, let's use the span plugin. Okay, I don't think we have to do much to this, honestly, because when I recorded it, I used the Ableton rack to kind of make it sound how I wanted it to. But what I am going to do is EQ it because I EQ everything. All right, let's see how that sounds with the piano and the other guitar. All right, let's move on to the choir and do the exact same thing. Once again, I don't think we have to do much to this because I did it all before I recorded it. So I am going to EQ it and call it good probably. Okay, I think that sounds pretty good. One thing I am going to do first is group all this stuff. Change this to melody. And I think the melody itself is a little bit loud, so I'm going to turn it down. Okay, cool. I think that sounds pretty good. All right, the next thing we are going to do, we are going to put a small compressor on the melody as a whole, and then EQ the whole melody a little bit, and then we will move on. So once again, it's really, really, really minimal, but it just makes it squish a little bit. So that's all we want. Put an EQ on it, cut the lows, cut the highs. All right, sweet. So we're almost done. The only thing left we have to do in the first mixing process is go into the master track. And the master track is the track that all of your other tracks go through before it actually goes into your ears. So if I mute the master track, you won't be able to hear anything. I turn it on, you can hear it because all the tracks are aggregating through there. So what we're going to do is, first off, always start with a span and a utility plugin. And what we want to do for the master track is I usually mix my master track at about -6. A lot of people get confused between mixing and mastering, and they're actually two different processes. Mixing is what we're doing right now, and mastering is like the final thing you do, another kind of mix that you do before you complete your song. All that does is mostly make it louder and clean up a little bit, but before you master, your song should be pretty much good to go. We just want it a little bit quiet so we have headroom or some volume to work with to actually boost the master. So that's what we're going to do, is put this at about -6. That's actually perfect. Okay, so first we're going to EQ it one more time, cut the highs, cut the lows, and then let's go ahead and do something that I do a lot. I use a plugin called Neutron 2. It's not free, and I don't have the paid version. So what I do is basically I go in here, and they have some great presets. And so I go into the mix bus and see if any of these make it sound a little better. And then we'll replicate that with the plugins and the audio effects with it in Ableton. So let's see what it sounds like. So let's go ahead and pick, I don't know, one of these mix bus. Let's just do a basic mix bus, see how that sounds. Basically what I'm going to do is replicate these using the regular plugins in Ableton. So the first thing we have is an EQ. So we've been using that all day. So let's go grab our EQ. And it looks like the first thing is this low cut at 30 Hertz. So that's what we're going to do, is cut ours at 30 Hertz as well. The next thing is it has a band shape here. So we're going to do that. Next thing is here. Next thing is going to be a little boost at 245 Hertz. And looking at this now, it looks a little bit high, so I'm actually going to go like 4, maybe even 3.5. Okay, so I think you guys get the idea with the EQ, so I'll just skip to the compressor. Looks like there's actually 3 compressors on here. Okay, so here is the first compressor, and we're just going to copy what this says. And as you can see, this one looks like it's only compressing the lower frequencies. So what we're going to do is open this up, EQ it, and go from here to about 251. Okay, so there's the first compressor. Let's just do the other two. Okay, so now that everything like that is done, I'm going to take all the stuff here and group them so that we can turn it on and off to see what it sounds like. So let's turn off Neutron, play it. Holy shit. Okay, so I ended up just taking out all the compressors and just putting in one, and I think it sounds a lot more like this. So here is Neutron. Here is ours. Obviously ours is pretty loud, but we can turn it down. So just go in here. Okay, and with that, I think that we are actually done mixing the beat. Thank you guys for watching this video. I'm actually recording this outro a day later because while editing the video, I realized I forgot to record one. If you haven't seen the previous episodes in this series, links will be in the description down below, as well as my socials. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I need the validation, please, I'm begging you. Make sure you give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss my next upload. I appreciate you guys watching all the way through, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.